Namaste and good morning. It's time for our sunrise meditation to start our day the positive way. So my name's Gayatri and I'm going to be guiding you through some breathing, some Guranga breath meditation, some japa and some kirtan, the spiritual wisdom. So just allow your body to relax. Just let it sink down into the cushion or the chair. Closing your eyes softly. Just feeling the body, being aware of any tension that you can feel in the body. And if you're feeling any tension, just let it go. Just release any tension. You can start to breathe it away if you like, breathing away any tension and stress on that exhale. So each time you exhale, you can allow that body to become softer and softer. Letting the shoulders sink down further and further. Face becoming softer. Teeth are parted a little, letting the jaw relax. Scalp is nice and relaxed. And we're going to bring the hands onto the belly below the navel. We're going to use the hands to guide the breath deep into the lungs. So as you inhale, we're going to slow the breath down but deepen it. You want to feel the belly expanding outwards. And then exhaling, the navel draws in. You can watch the journey of the breath. That helps to keep your mind on the breath. And take one more breath into the belly. And then we're going to cross our arms over and place our hands onto our ribs, or you can just slide them up if you like, whichever works better for you. And we're going to now breathe into the middle lungs. So as you inhale, the ribs expand out to the sides, and then as you exhale, they contract back into the core of the body. Inhale, expanding, exhale, contracting. Feel the expansion of your lungs in every direction. The lungs move in a three-dimensional fashion, so feel them moving into the front, the sides and the back of your body. Just becoming more in tune with your body, what it's doing. One more into the middle lungs. And then we'll bring the hands up onto the chest. Fingers are lightly touching the collarbones. And we're going to inhale into the upper lungs now. So as you inhale, chest expands. As you exhale, chest softens. As you inhale, collarbones move away from each other slightly. As you exhale, they move together a little. Just keeping the lower lungs relaxed and isolating this top section of the lungs. Take one more breath into the upper lungs. And we'll place one hand back on the belly below the navel. We're going to join all three breaths for a complete yoga breath now. So we're going to fill the lungs from the bottom to the top and empty them from the top to the bottom, just like a cup or a balloon. When you fill a cup or a balloon, you fill from the bottom to the top, and as it empties from the top to the bottom. So as you inhale, the belly expands, then the ribs, then the chest. As you exhale, chest softens, ribs draw in, navel draws in. This is where the breath becomes like a wave, a nice rhythmical flowing wave. Three more breaths. Nice, deep, relaxing breaths. Relax your hands in your lap. Just relax your breathing. Just keeping your eyes closed, we're going to move into mantra breathing. So the mantra we're going to be saying is Gauranga, said in 4 syllables. Gauranga. So we're going to inhale and say the mantra within our mind, and then exhale and say it out loud for the entire length of the breath. Feel it vibrating in your mouth, in your throat, on your tongue, throughout your whole body. Just let this vibration envelop you. So take a nice inhale now. And exhale. Inhale. Inhale, saying it mentally. And exhale, saying it aloud. Hold the mantra within your mind and let it resonate there. It's time for some japa meditation. So we're just going to do one round on our beads. If you don't have beads, you can just chant along with us. So we've got a head bead at the top. We're going to say the mantra Hari Bol and move to the next bead. Next to the head bead, traditionally with the middle finger and thumb, and say the mantra Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol. Move to the next bead, Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol. And we'll continue around until we get back to the head bead and you have completed one round of japa meditation, and your mind will be much calmer and body relaxed and soul soothed. So let's start. I'll set the rhythm and then you can join in whenever you feel you're ready to do so. Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol. 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 Hari Bol, Nitai Go, excuse me. Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol. 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 Last one. Hari Bol, Nitai Go, Hari Bol. So there's no hard and fast rules for mantra meditation, japa. You just need to try to keep your mind on the sound. So we need to start to control our mind a little bit and placing it on this sound continually. will help us to begin to discipline the mind, and we'll get more from our practice if we're more focused on our meditation. So we're going to practice a little bit of kirtan now. Sing it with the mantra Om Hari Om. So I'll sing the mantra through first and then you respond. Once again, keeping your mind on the sound. If it wanders off, gently bring it back onto the sound. together. you feel refreshed. I do. Hopefully you feel the same. And we've got a little bit of spiritual wisdom now, just to finish off our morning session. This is from the wisdom of the ancient Bhagavad Gita. Life lessons they are. In this world there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism or yoga, and one who has achieved this enjoys the self within himself in due course of time. So rather than enjoying our material body and, well, the mind's not very enjoyable, we enjoy as a spiritual being within. We actually have spiritual senses and a spiritual body, and we can enjoy fully blissful, in a state of full bliss. So that's what we can achieve through meditation, complete and utter bliss. Namaste.